So I did a Twitter poll, and I asked all of you lovely people what you think of Beto's AR-15 mandatory buyback. And the results are pretty interesting. Now, I do think it's fair to call this confiscation, because if it's a mandatory buyback, it's mandatory. It becomes illegal to own an AR-15. So it's not just, and it's a very important distinction. It's not just, hey, from here on out, they cannot sell AR-15s. The idea is, from here on out, they can't sell AR-15s. And also, we're going to retroactively try to take away all the ones that are out there right now. So it's definitely further than anybody's gone in the national debate when it comes to gun reform. And Beto kind of proudly planted that flag and said, what'd he say? Hell yes, we're going to take your gun or something like that. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15. I forget his exact phrasing, but it was something like that. So anyway, here's the results of the poll I put out there. I said, Beto's mandatory buyback. And then I said, I think it's fair to call it confiscation of AR-15s. I'm for it, 34%. I'm against it, 41%. I'm not sure, 25%. So that's really interesting because, again, definitely at least 80% of my followers are on the left. And so for the results to be like this, when there's a bias in a left-wing direction, I think says something. And 34% being for it, that's actually very low. Now, I know there were 3 options, but still, I'm against it was the biggest option by itself. But also, when you add together I'm against it and I'm not sure, which still fundamentally is like, no, don't do it. Because if you're not sure, you're not going to do it when you're not sure. You're going to be like, I don't know. So that would be, what's 41 plus 25? Let's do math. I'm not very good at this. 41, 51, 61. So that's 20. So 66. So 66% are basically on the side of, that's a lot. That's a lot, man. Only 34% are for it. So, when we discussed this, my general take was I lean in the direction of no, but overall I'm still just not sure what I think about it. What I do favor very strongly is a universal background check system, for sure, a ban on high-capacity magazines, rigidly enforced, by the way, for sure, and I even favor a licensing system. Now, I think that some sort of a licensing system would probably get a challenge through the court system, and I actually think it's an open question as to whether or not like a real licensing system would be considered constitutional or not. But I do favor a licensing system because, and it's a really reasonable point, there's a really important process you have to go through before you could legally drive a car. So, people say that's a weapon. A car could be a weapon. So when you have actual, legit weapons that are only weapons, there's no licensing process. It does seem a little bit archaic and primitive. So that's what I support. And there's probably some others that are not popping in my head right now. Am I in favor of a ban on automatic or assault weapons, as they call them? But when you talk to gun diehards, they're like assault weapons. That's not really a thing. I'm open to that. I kind of lean in the direction of yes on that as well. However, I think it should be done from here on out. Like, you can't sell them anymore. I just think the way it would work to do a mandatory buyback, and by the way, I'm fine with a voluntary buyback. That I'm totally fine with, but a mandatory buyback, like, the dynamics of it just seem wrong in that it's like, okay, it is like gun confiscation, and it does kind of strike me as, I don't want to say anti-American because that's too strong, but it is not something I think would go smoothly, and I would understand why it wouldn't go smoothly. And it's a little bit too much, in my opinion. But then the counter-argument to what I'm saying is, like, no, if you think in principle that these kinds of weapons of war are wrong, then of course the reasonable position is get rid of the weapons of war. And that would include the ones that are already out there. And another good point is probably that, it would definitely tick down the number of gun deaths. Then again, every reform that I'm in favor of, I think, would massively tick down the number of gun deaths. For sure. But would Beto's idea perhaps reduce the number of gun deaths further? Yeah. I mean, if that's your ultimate goal, then yes. But again, that's not the only thing to consider when discussing policy. And it gets to the conversation that we actually just had about the fucking, e-cigarettes and vaping and how they banned flavored vaping. 6 people allegedly had died from that. And they're like, good, ban it, gone. But again, it's not like, I don't think that's the only lens you view it through, is what about the deaths? There are other factors that come into play. Now, should the deaths be a big part of it? Yes. But is the only part of it? No. But I will give Beto credit on this. At least he moved the Overton window in a direction that's, in my opinion, more reasonable. Now, I don't really agree with him on what he's calling for, but it does shift the debate and make it so that now the other reforms appear as reasonable as they really are. Like, again, universal background check polls over 90%. Over 90. Even assault weapons ban is well over 50. So when he says what he said, well, now it's easy to be like, well, he's the bad guy, but there's a lot of reasonable people out there who are just like, hey, man, here's what we can do. Universal background checks, high-capacity magazine ban, so on and so forth. So I don't know. And the other question is, did he do this because he really believes in it, or did he do it because his campaign is flailing and he's at 1% and he needed to make a name, and so he had to plant a flag and try to outflank everybody on stage on an issue, and this is the issue he settled on? And I'm sorry, but maybe it's my skeptical nature here when it comes to Beto, because we've been burned by him in the past, but I lean in the direction of he doesn't really, like, this isn't really something he's like, hell yeah, this is my position. It is more of like a political calculation on his part, where this is a strategy. He's doing it more as a strategy than a really deep-seated, deeply held belief. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he actually does. This is an issue where he really does take this position and he's really passionate about it. I don't know. But either way, I thought it was fascinating what your responses were. 34% for it, 41% against it, 25% not sure.